Now when we get down to house number 4 of QFD, we're looking to define process variables or process requirements. So these are things in processes or in the process or in processes that will be required to make the design requirements and the functional requirements, the CTSs, and the high-level requirements or the high-level needs of the customer real. As with the other houses, we notice here on the left-hand side that in this case, the design requirements are pulled in from the previous house, and then for each one, we identify at a minimum one process requirement. Now, I've got noted here an SOP. Many times when you get to this point, and if you've got mature processes, particularly manufacturing, then a lot of the manufacturing processes will have been defined. So whether it's turning, lathe operations, any kind of plating or heat treat operations, those are usually specified in some kind of an SOP or a technical specification of some kind. So that's what I'm intending to indicate here. So seat pan location, the cushion height, what I'm proposing or what I'm indicating here is that the means to achieve that via process is located in SOP 1.2.11. And for item number 2, which is cushion, is integral to the design and is not sewn, the process necessary, the process requirements of the process variable and specifications are contained in SOP 1.3.12, for example. Okay? And on we go. Now, there may be no current process or specification, and it is the time to then specify what that would be to meet the design requirement. And keep in mind, the context here is everything we do has some element of people and the skills and the knowledge, the experience, and so forth. The processes that were used and the specifications around those processes, and then the product or the technology, if you like. So the tools, the systems we use, and or the products we are constructing. Those three in combination with themselves make up more or less what the customer experiences, and so that's why we're down here in the process part of what very well could be, or in many cases is, a design requirement for a product. Once we have each of the process requirements spelled out, then as with the other 3 houses, we want to then understand the relationship between, or the correlation between, each one of the design requirements, the design requirements and the process requirements. And what I would expect to see, and again, the first thing I look for in these is some sort of a diagonal such that I see 9s. And what it tells me then is for each one of the design requirements, I have at least one process variable. So I complete that process of the correlation. I also then look at the conflict matrices up here to see if we in fact do have conflicts. It's not as important now because we have process and process requirements, and they could very likely be different processes that are maybe sequential to one another. It isn't often that you see a conflict in processes where you've got a multiple process workflow that you're trying to execute to turn the raw material into the product, such that when you've got parallel processes such that they conflict with one another. So you don't often see conflicts up here, but occasionally you will find conflicts. And then it is possible, but again not as likely, that you're going to have any kind of competitive information relative to the process, particularly in mature processes. Although when you sit and think about it, the reality is that many processes that industry use are not world-class or standard, certainly, or not, at least not necessarily, better than the competitors. And so this is an opportunity to review your processes and determine whether or not there's a less expensive way to do it that's quicker, that's more robust to noise variables in the process and so forth. Maybe it requires less training or dependency on the employees and this sort of thing. Okay. Now, just before we wrap this video up, I wanted to mention the fact that many processes that use, or I should say many products that use the QFD process, many belts won't get to house number 4, and it's either because they don't feel the need to do it, and or the product must adhere to existing processes, and those have been clearly defined previously for other like products, for example. So it isn't, if you're looking at a QFD and you're looking for house 4 and one doesn't exist, you need to ask why. But don't be surprised if the answer comes back that it wasn't felt necessary for the for the product to be designed. So this is the last in the series on QFD. I hope you've enjoyed them, and I hope that this 4 videos has helped to solidify this idea of taking high-level customer needs, turning them into critical satisfaction. Those in turn become functional requirements. How does the product or service have to function? And once we understand how it has to function, then we get into the detail of design requirements, what design requirements are necessary to meet the customer CTSs. And then lastly, what are the process variables or the process requirements or the process sort of specifications or constraints that tie all of this together such that the customer and the product or service they're receiving is satisfactory and meets their needs. And that's it for QFD.